Call it like we see it. Mike Tomlin, a great culture guy. A great culture guy. There is no denying that. There is no denying he is probably an above-average coach in the National Football League. But based on what I am seeing, especially in the postseason, especially in the biggest games, ever since Roethlisberger retired, has been nothing short of pathetic. And it's not even it's not even a couple games. It is game by game by game by game. They stink when it matters. They get figured out towards the end of the year. They always surprise people towards the earlier onset, and then people either point fingers at what the quarterback's doing or the offense, or the defense is better than what the offense should be, or the offense is better than what the defense should be. It's never put together with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we were talking, this was a conversation even at the tail end of Roethlisberger's career. So it was a problem when he was there, and now it's a problem when Kenny Pickett was there, and then it was a problem when it was a quarterback by committee trying to figure it out game by game, and then now it's a problem once again with Russell Wilson at quarterback. So at a certain point, I think we're going to have to start pointing some fingers at who really the underlying problem may be. And maybe, and this is not me bashing Tomlin, he gets a lot out of the rosters. I believe that. There's no denying that. But in terms of getting the most and staying out of purgatory, and that purgatory is losing, being uncompetitive in the playoffs, you're not great enough to win, and you're not bad enough to reset. So they're almost in a purgatory of a year by year, same process, same song, different year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They stink in every big game they play. He is 3-9 in the postseason ever since Green Bay beat them in the Super Bowl all those years ago. That was in 2010, February of 2011. So we're talking about 14 years we were talking about where Mike Tomlin has won 3 playoff games. If that is any other coach in the National Football League, any other franchise, I think we are having severely different conversations than the apologizing and the directing blame elsewhere comparatively to what Mike Tomlin did. So I'm a little upset with what I've seen out of them and how pathetic they have been.
Yeah, and there are a ton of Steeler fans that I know. I mention you all the time. My best friend is a Steeler fan, and he's been wanting to get out of Tomlin for 5 years now. And I think everyone is starting to realize that the quarterback situation has been a nightmare. I could argue he never got the best of Ben Roethlisberger. Now, obviously, when people say, Colin, with Roethlisberger and Tomlin, they won a Super Bowl. A lot of people say that it was Cowher's team. I understand that. But he didn't get the best of his roster. His roster was the Le'Veon Bell, the Cam Hayward in his prime, the Antonio Brown in his prime. People would argue the Ben Roethlisberger in his prime. You know, his teams were the teams that lost at home in the playoffs, a la your Jacksonville Jaguars, Blake Bortles and company, all those years back. They also lost, I believe, to David Garrard and company before as well. So when you think of Mike Tomlin with the Steelers, it's underachieving, which is crazy to think because he's never had a losing season. But Pittsburgh is one of those organizations in the NFL that don't have the same expectations as other franchises in the NFL. I laugh as a miserable Brown fan. I'd take Mike Tomlin in a heartbeat to win 10 games, go to the playoffs, because that's something I'm not used to. But for Steeler fan who has 6 championships, this is a big deal. It's a big deal to lose 8, 9 playoff games in a row. It's a big deal that fans can call the season before it starts. I saw a hysterical call where a guy calls in and said, I called the whole damn year, and I'm about to call the whole damn year next year as well. 10-8. You lose in the playoffs, never have a chance against a really good team. So I understand both sides. I understand the angry Steeler fan that wants to move on from Tomlin, but at the same time, isn't it crazy that a guy who's never had a losing record is on the chopping block like this? Those are the expectations at Pittsburgh.
I don't think that he's on the chopping block. I don't think the from what the franchise looks like and how traditionalist they are, I don't think they're going to make a move. But let's call it like we see it. Even if you want to make the postseason every year, you are uncompetitive in every single round. Every single game that you have played in the postseason, ever since that loss to New England, 7 years ago? Ever since that loss to New England, let's go through it for a second. You've lost your last 6 playoff games, 3-9 since that Super Bowl. Those 6 games, you were down 36-9 to New England. The next year, you were down 21-0 to open the game against Jacksonville. The year after that, you were down 35-7 to Cleveland. Then the year after that, then you don't make the playoffs for a couple years. And then finally, when you get back in, you're down 35-7 to Kansas City. And then Buffalo last year was a 21-0 ball game. And then what did we see on Saturday? 21-0. These are 3-possession ball games before they even get the ball rolling offensively. There should be no conversation in my head. It's a recency league. It's a recency league. There's a reason that they were done with Belichick when he walked out of there. They're not looking at Belichick, and Belichick has the pedigree comparatively, has an excellent postseason record, and they still ran him out of town. So if they got Belichick out of town, I know it looked worse, but still, if we're going to judge him off the pedigree that we saw 15 years ago, then why did Belichick get run out of town? Mm-hmm. They're getting dominated in the early parts of these games. They're all uncompetitive. It's not like they're losing in classics. It's not like they're Buffalo and they're losing in dramatic fashion year after year. They are getting dominated year after year in the postseason. And I cannot deal with the people that think that the 10-8s and going 10-7 and getting dominated in the first round of the playoffs is all that great. It's really not. Because you're not even getting a home game out of it half the time. You're getting dominated. I cannot listen to this. And Mike Tomlin's another guy. It's not like people are lining up to get after Tomlin's tree of coaches. It's not like their offensive coordinator's getting plucked every year. Not like that's a bad thing.
They call it quickly. They get fired. They don't get plucked. They get fired.
They move on from everybody outside of the coach and the general manager. They've had 2 general managers in 20 years. So if it's a roster problem, why aren't we changing general managers? I know Omar Khan's only been there for 3 years, but they've had 2 general managers in 20 years. So if it's a roster problem, why don't we adjust it there? But if it's not a roster problem and they're uncompetitive in each game they play, every big game they play, after having a competitive regular season, why don't we make a change of coach? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that Tomlin wouldn't be looked at. Of course he'd get calls. But a separation, a mutual separation, I think would benefit the Steelers in the long run.
I think that a coach like Tomlin would benefit from going to a team who's in the dumps. You know, a team that
he's a culture guy.
Yeah, like the Raiders. Like Colin, off the top of my head, the Raiders. They've been bad for a long time. There's been a stink in that organization for a long time. I know Tom Brady's trying to change that fair play to him. But my example, the Raiders who have stunk, Tomlin could go in there, have winning seasons, and be successful. Now, you start questioning when you become a championship caliber team. Now, I think you and I could both agree the Steelers haven't been a championship caliber team for a long time. He's just been getting the best out of his players. That's why he's such a good coach. So my take is, I think Steeler fan is done with Tomlin. I think Tomlin is done with Steeler fan, but is the organization done with Tomlin? Because this is an organization that prides themselves on stability, that prides themselves on, hey, we've been through 2 head coaches in about 40, 30, 40 years. This is the Rooneys we're talking about. This isn't one of the organizations where you got turnover at the head coaching position, to your point, at the head coaching position and the GM position. I think the Rooneys and that ownership group kind of takes pride in that. And I don't know. I think Tomlin's done with the fans. I think the fans are done with Tomlin.
So you think you think Tomlin's done with Pittsburgh?
I think Tomlin's tired of hearing Steeler fans complain when all he does is win. Now, Steeler fans...
Hold on. All he does not win. He wins in the regular season.
Wins.
Sure, let's set up the parade. He hasn't done anything in the postseason for the better part of 15 years.
And that's Steeler fan. And that's Steeler fan who can't take in the handle not being good in the playoffs and not competing. So I think it is the time to split. I think it is a perfect time to split, but I don't think the organization is going to do it. My best guess, Tomlin's coaching next year for the Steelers.
And it's just, if we're going to peek behind the curtain on how the Steeler fan thinks, really how that franchise thinks, it's like they're afraid to even consider the conversation. It's almost like you're messing with the bad mojo, the bad voodoo, if you even consider the prospect that maybe you're not getting Tomlin's not getting the most out of the team. And if you want to make the argument that he is getting the most out of the team, but what the most out of the team is very ceilinged, and it's uncompetitive when it matters in the postseason, sure. Then who are we? Why shouldn't we ask questions? Why shouldn't we consider the fact that maybe this is not the right time to have a guy like Mike Tomlin in there? I think he is so overrated. And bad games, sure, getting back into it somewhat in the second half. They got back into that Jacksonville game. It happens. I understand that. But these ugly losses, it's not even they're pretty. They're ugly. That Steeler game on Saturday was a disgrace.
It was.
They were terrible. They couldn't move the ball. And defensively, it wasn't